Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. With host and founder Richard Case and co-host and retreat leader Kathy Ricconi. Join us every weekday at this time to discuss news, spend time in the Word, and receive answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. And now your host, Richard Case.
Good morning, Kathy.
Good morning.
How are you doing today? We're still in our series on prayer, and we're having a good time with it. And I know that your prayer life is very vibrant, and so is mine. Anything you'd like to, just kind of as we've been walking through this, anything that struck you or you want to highlight for people your experience with it and the beauty, the privilege, beauty, and the fantastic life we have of prayer with God.
Wow, that's a loaded question. I think
what are the 20 things you want to share?
yeah, right. But one of the things that I would just say that I would encourage people with is I think prayer is probably one of the things that people struggle with the most, and often feel is empty. A lot of times I think they feel like they just have to do it. They don't recognize, and so much of what we have talked and taught about is the relational, how this is conversation with God. But I think there are still so many people who don't fully recognize the gift of the conversation that they have been given in the beauty of prayer. And I even was talking with somebody the other day, and I know today we're going to be getting into Habakkuk, and it actually goes quite well with this. But I was speaking with someone the other day who was really frustrated in her prayer life, honestly. Very frustrated because she's like, I feel like I have a heart to hear, and I'm praying and I'm asking, and everybody around me says they hear, and I'm not hearing anything. And, is feeling this angst and this frustration. She's like, maybe he's angry with me. Maybe I've done something so he doesn't want to speak to me. And I think the doubts and the fears that she was feeling and expressing very authentically are where a lot of people get stuck and then give up on prayer and don't get to step into the fullness of the beauty because they hit that, don't know what to do with it, and decide it just must not be, I must not be one of the chosen ones who gets to have that conversation with God.
Right. Yeah. And the thought, again, this is where there's a limited view of prayer, is that what I'm praying for, nothing is happening. And I guess God is silent, and I don't even know. I mean, because remember, people kind of have been taught a certain structure of prayer is yes, no, maybe.
Right.
But you really don't know the no until what I asked for doesn't happen, or it's beyond happening. I guess it, and you don't really, interesting enough, know fully it's a no. It's just, I guess it's a no. So in the meantime, nothing's happening, and I'm not hearing anything, and I'm not understanding anything. I guess I'm not lucky one, and I don't get it. And partly there's two reasons for that. One is there's a backward understanding of prayer.
Right.
We think, well, God, here's what I want you to do. Let me know when you do it. And I guess I'll know if you say yes. If you do it, if you don't, I guess it's a no. And you're actually telling God what to do for you because you think you know the answer, which in your mind is, if this would happen, it would be good. And God says, well, remember, and this is what we've been through already, is that when you pray, thy kingdom come, it happens in the kingdom, and to get into the kingdom, you have to surrender your will to mine and let me be king. And then it's operational, and then thy will be done. Ask me for my will. So that always, prayer is always backing up what I call backing up a step. Instead of telling God, I want, I need, and please do, it's, I have an issue. I have a situation. A little bit like we talked about with Jeremiah, that this ain't working out. I need to talk to you about that. What do you got to say about it? And so it's always, what's your will, what's your insight, what's your truth about it, and then start to walk with him. And what do you hear? What do you understand? What do you know to be true? What does God say next? What does he do next? And by the way, and this is important, we talked about this before too, is that often it's in fellowship with other people. That insight,
which is a
wisdom,
beautiful gift.
Yeah, it's a beautiful gift. So that as you're talking and somebody else is processing with you, that is the Holy Spirit saying, let me show you something.
Continuing to speak and reveal.
I've taught with Henry Blackaby, who is the one that wrote Experiencing God, and we would be in sessions. Usually we were always teaching, and the group that I was teaching with them was always executives, CEOs of companies, and a question would come up. Because we'd be, a topic would always be prayer. There'd be a time where we'd be talking about prayer. And they said, well, how come God is silent? And I have periods of silence. I don't hear nothing.
Right.
And Henry was always just straight up and spoke things, directly.
Very blunt.
He was very blunt. That's a good word to put it. He was very blunt. He said, well, the problem isn't God, it's you. He said, right. I'm letting you know. And again, he would use the example of Christ. What did Christ say? I did nothing except what the Father spoke.
Right.
He says, so you're telling me that Jesus said, what do you have to say? And the Father said, I'm not telling you. We're going to have a couple weeks of silence. That means he would be doing nothing, because he said, I only did what the Father spoke to me. He said, the problem isn't God, it's you. God's always speaking. But if you're not hearing, it's that you've gone away from the kingdom. You've pursued your own will, and you actually aren't interested in hearing what God has to say.
Right. And honestly, sometimes we get so distracted.
That
we have so many other voices playing in that we aren't able to focus on his voice. And so that's an important part as well, know?
And even when that's what we went through with Jeremiah, is that God says it's not about how you feel. Particularly when you're discouraged, particularly when I don't get this at all, this ain't working out at all. He says, I know. Come and talk to me. Share with me, where are you? Don't sugarcoat it all. Just lay it out there. But let's process together, And again, the picture that we're trying to portray is Jesus with his disciples, which is why he said, hey, up until now, you really haven't had to pray because you've had me. He said the way that we operated for 3 years, and again, just go through the stories. Were the disciples confused? Yes.
Often, but then they would just ask questions and he would clarify.
Were they discouraged? Yes. We don't get this. I think he's talking about this. He must be mad at us, and all kinds of scenarios of life. But the thing they continued to do is just stay with him.
Right.
He said, now the way you've been walking with me that's prayer.
Yeah.
Just keep talking, listen, process, even when you don't get it. And by the way, a lot of times, and Jesus would do this, is they wouldn't pursue any further.
Right.
He didn't chase them down. He just said, okay,
right.
If you guys don't want to know anything more, that's fine. Well, we can wait. No problem.
That's a big deal, what you're talking about right there. I would say probably one of the things that has most changed my prayer life is the movement from what you term binary questions. Asking God, because even when I had a heart to know, coming in and I was just asking yes, no questions, basically, and learning to ask deeper questions, to really delve into all of that with him. And Anna actually said it best a few weeks back on the podcast when she mentioned something about, God was laying on her heart to ask these questions. And then, by the way, you don't know what questions to ask. So ask me what questions to ask. And I think even that was a sweet thing, is recognizing, for me, like I said, that was a big game changer when I stopped asking binary questions in prayer and I started having a conversation with him and letting the details and the why behind things. And I think about even, I've shared with you before how our family does my one word for the
Yeah.
year and
Yeah.
all of that. And so this year, our family word is magnify. My personal word is surrender.
Yeah.
And so that's fun to just watch what he's doing in that. But the other day, as I was processing with him and having him lead me to different verses that are going to that I'll work through on those, one of the things I felt like he said is, I was jumping right ahead, typical me style. I'm like, okay, so show me what it is that, why you've chosen surrender. What is it you need me to surrender? Because I'm ready to go there. And he's like, whoa, hold on. I don't want to even tell you the what right now.
Yeah.
Let's stop and look at the why.
Yeah.
I want you to have a firm foundation in the why I'm asking you to surrender more, because that why is going to be an anchor when the surrendering things that I call you to are even harder than what other people are dealing with or whatever. I want to solidify the why. So even in that, again, no binary, whatever, asking, and he's like, oh, back up. There's so much more that's here than what you're seeing. So stay with me on it.
Yeah.
And I love how personal he is in that.
Yeah. And that if you're in dialogue and you can say, well, I would like to, he says, well, before we go there, I need to back up a little bit. Let me tell you what this is about. And see, if you're in dialogue, you're hearing that. And if you're hearing that, your response is what? Okay.
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah. I get it. Okay, let's go.
This will be interesting. This will be fun. And see, the joy of God, walking with God, it's an incredible adventure. It's full of surprises. I've got so much to relate to you, speak to you, show you. And see, my heart is, man, this ought to be fun. This is really
absolutely
fun. Even when I thought I should go this way, say, wait a minute, let me go this way. Okay, great. This ought to be fun.
Right.
So as we we're going to look at now Habakkuk. Interesting. We've talked about, remember Jeremiah, who said repent, and they didn't. We've gone to Nehemiah that returned. We talked to Daniel, who was in the middle of that remnant group in between. Habakkuk, and these are things that people generally don't put two and two together, is a contemporary of Jeremiah.
Okay. So put him in the timeline for me then.
Okay, so Jeremiah is a youngster.
Okay.
And this is, by the way, about 587, 600 BC.
Okay.
I want you to speak to the nation.
Okay.
And tell them, repent. And we go through, there's all the chapters, 31 chapters of Jeremiah. He does. At the end of it, now it's already been determined that judgment's coming. So he said they've passed the point,
and that's not going to change.
They
right?
can't repent anymore. And now it's the remnant, and tell the remnant to come. And in the last, what they call the last year or two or three of that period, and Jeremiah was doing it, for many, many years, like as many as 13, 14 years. The last 2 or 3 years, he calls Habakkuk.
Okay.
And he says, now I want you to speak to them now specifically about what's going to happen here, the judgment, the Babylonian captivity. And I have a word for you. And and he basically says to Habakkuk the same thing. Now you speak to it. Now this is, by the way, one thing that we understand is that then therefore did the whole message was it on the burden and back of Jeremiah? It wasn't.
No.
He actually had a compadre who understood it and was joining him and speaking to the nation as well about something now. He wasn't like Jeremiah. You're to cover the whole period. It's just the end of this period that Habakkuk was called to do this. So that's the scenario, and its judgment is now imminent.
Okay.
Okay. So then read how Habakkuk related in prayer to God.
Okay. It says, the burden which the prophet Habakkuk saw. O Lord, how long shall I cry and you will not hear? Even cry out to you, violence, and you will not save. Why do you show me iniquity and cause me to see trouble? For plundering and violence are before me. There's strife and contention arises. Therefore, the law is powerless and justice never goes forth. For the wicked surround the righteous. Therefore, perverse judgment proceeds. Look among the nations and watch and be utterly astounded. For I will work a work in your days which you would not believe, though it were told you. For indeed I'm raising up the Chaldeans, a bitter and hasty nation, which marches through the breadth of the earth to possess dwelling places that are not theirs. They are terrible and dreadful, and their judgment and their dignity proceed from themselves. Their horses are also swifter than leopards and more fierce than evening wolves. Their chargers charge ahead, their cavalry comes from afar. They fly as the eagle hastens to eat. They all come for violence. Their faces are set like the east wind. They gather captives like sand. They scoff at kings, and princes are scorned by them. They deride every stronghold, for they heap up earthen mounds and seize it. Then his mind changes and he transgresses. He commits offense, ascribing this power to his God. By the way, that is not a fun message to give anyone, right?
No. No.
I don't envy these guys.
Yeah,
okay.
right.
Are you not from everlasting, O Lord, my God, my Holy One? We shall not die. O Lord, you've appointed them for judgment. O Rock, you've marked them for correction. You are of purer eyes than to behold evil, and cannot look on wickedness. Why do you look on those who deal treacherously and hold your tongue when the wicked devours a person more righteous than he? Why do you make men like fish of the sea, like creeping things that have no ruler over them? They take up all of them with a hook, they catch them in their net and gather them in their dragnet. Therefore they rejoice and are glad. Therefore they sacrifice to their net and burn incense to their dragnet, because by them their share is sumptuous and their food plentiful. Shall they therefore empty their net and continue to slay nations without pity? I will stand at my watch and set myself on the rampart and watch to see what he will say to me and what I will answer when I am corrected. Then the Lord answered me and said, write the vision and make it plain on tablets, that he may run who reads it. For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it will speak and it will not lie. Though it tarries, wait for it, because it will surely come, it will not tarry. Behold the proud, his soul is not upright in him, but the just shall live by his faith.
Okay. So remember, this is, he understands, probably with conversation with Jeremiah, God has said judgment's coming and it's sure, and there's no shot anymore at him relenting from that truth. And Habakkuk's been told by God, I want you to join him and now speak to it.
Right.
And so he basically, when you look at the first several verses, it's, why are you causing me trouble and telling me that it's over?
Right.
And that's it. And that's the message you want me to give? Why? I don't get that. I would, in essence, I would rather not. And so you've said something. I'm in a situation I don't understand at all. It seems contrary to what you are and what you've said. And it seems like it doesn't make sense to me, and that the enemy and the wicked who are not responding are going to, so far, since they haven't responded, nothing's really happened. So I guess it doesn't really matter. And God says, okay, thanks for coming and asking me that question.
Right.
He says, I'm going to do something among you that you're not going to even completely believe it at all, what I'm up to. So first of all, I'm asking you, which, by the way, he ends this discussion, and we'll come back to it. The just shall live by what?
By faith.
Faith.
Yep.
He says, I'm asking you to trust me. I'm going to do something, it's going to even be hard for you to understand what I'm up to. In other words, I'm up to something way bigger than you, and what your limited perspective is on this. So get ready. First of all, I'm going to tell you, don't worry. I'm going to speak it. He says judgment's coming, and it's sure, and it's because they haven't followed me. And he says, because they've committed offense, the judgment is coming, and that's part of my nature too. And you got to really understand this. He says, don't just think of the good stuff. The covenant is absolute. It's conditional.
Right.
I'm going to bless you to make you a blessing, and that's my heart. And by the way, ultimately, that's what I'm calling you to do. But if you don't, there's consequences to that, because I'm holy. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's interesting, even as I look this, behold the proud, his soul is not upright in him, but the just shall live by his faith. When I read that, normally I think I've heard it too many times, the just shall live by faith. And so I think, oh, live by faith, it's walking with him, it's, whatever. The translation of that shall live by faith is literally actually to stay alive and to be preserved.
Right.
And so in this situation, I think that's very interesting to look at that. We don't need to dismiss that or take that lightly. Literally, he's saying, those guys who are walking with me and stepping out in faith as I speak, as I lead, in this remnant, they're literally going to be preserved. This is how they're going to stay alive in the midst of this, which I think is fascinating.
That's right. So, I don't get this. I am. What I'm saying is true, and what I'm gonna do is amazing. You'll see it. Trust me. Stay with me. So then he says, okay. So really, you're saying that judgment is sure because. Yes. So he says, all right. I understand what you're saying. I do understand what you're saying. In chapter 2, he says that I'm going to stand, watch, wait for you to speak, set myself on the rampart. In other words, ready to hear what you have to say.
Right.
Watch to see what you will say, and then I'm going to answer when I'm what? Corrected. So think about what he just said. I started out with, I don't get this at all, and I'd rather not. God says, I really want you to, and I'm going to show you things that you don't know, and I am who I am, and you know who I am, and I'm telling you who I am, and that's true. So he says, okay, so you've said that this judgment is because of what they've done. Yes.
Right.
It's going to happen. Yes. Okay. Well, then I'll just stay here and wait for you to speak me, and I know something. In because of how I've approached it, is you're going to correct me because I kind of have it off. Okay, now think about his heart. What has just happened to him? About what has happened to him, where he's come to, where he started, and why did he get there?
He's got a humble heart, wanting to hear, and so he's dialoguing with God. And giving him, that's that surrendered heart, really, of, I want what you want. I want to understand. And whatever that takes, I'm going to step into that.
Yeah. And it's like, in essence, I know I understand I don't have this right. I know I'm going to get corrected.
Yeah.
I welcome the correction because I'm going to stand here, watch, and wait, and trust that, yep, I'm going to get corrected. So I'm going to release my pride. Even the beginning of my question is, I don't get this at all, and I'd rather not do it.
Right.
And it seems like this isn't right. Yeah. Okay. Let me tell you that I'll speak. So I'm willing to be corrected. Okay. Now, that's his perspective. I'm willing to be corrected. What was God's perspective toward him not being right?
Really just to stay with him and he'd get him there. Yeah. That was it.
See, I'm not going to, and this is important as we're praying why we can be it authentically, is I'm not going to beat you up about this.
Right.
Are you right? No. Do you need to be corrected? Yes. If you keep going the way you're going, you're going to miss it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want you to miss it. All I need for you to say is, I kind of see I don't have this right.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, all right, I'm just going to wait for you to tell me the truth. It's going to correct me. I know that. I'm willing to be corrected. And God says, in my correction, I'm not going to beat you up.
Right.
I'm not going to condemn you. Because what do I care about? I care about you going forward. And yeah, we got to work through this. Because I care about what? Your heart. Is your heart willing to walk with me? And yeah, I'm gonna correct you. There's gonna be lots of times, because we're imperfect, sinful people that have a flesh and struggle with the flesh still. I have to be corrected. I have to be, wait a minute, Rich, what you're thinking here isn't right. What you just said isn't right. You just stepped into it, and you really shouldn't have. You didn't check with me, and you went off and did something, and you got some consequences now. But, okay. Are you willing to be corrected?
Yeah.
And I can tell you that having learned it, my heart is, sure.
Right. Well, and I think you see his heart. I mean, like just that verse, I'll stand at my watch, set myself on the rampart, and watch to see what he'll say to me and what I'll answer when I'm corrected. That's a verse that has lived this by experience before.
Right. Yeah.
This is not his first go round in terms of walking in that processing and prayer with God, and knowing that God, when he surrenders his heart, that God will correct him and give him truth and give him insight, and that he will respond to that. And so I love that, because he uses that word watch, which it's a very active, it's to look out, to watch closely. It's not, I'm just going to sit around and wait and maybe whatever. It's, I am fully expecting you to answer.
Yeah.
And when you answer, I'm expecting a correction, and I'm going to come under it.
Right.
And I'm ready to do that. I've got a heart ready to do that. Position me to do it.
Yep. And then we actually use this verse as part of our encouragement to journal. But he says, I'm going to give you a vision. Mm-hmm. I'm going to explain this. Write it down.
Write it down. It's so important.
Write it down so that you can ponder it, process it, and then understand it. So that even, I heard you. And by the way, we have a tendency, and this is what I say to people who are learning to abide, is, well, I read the Bible. I read the Bible. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I like it. And I'm excited about it. Okay, good. What did it say to you last week?
No idea.
I don't remember.
Right.
Because, see, our minds are built in a way that it isn't, without the processing, without the writing piece of it, without the having it recorded and then going back over to process it, our minds aren't built that way to retain it all. Mm-hmm. And even I've got a really, really good memory, but there's no way I can remember last 2 weeks ago what God said if I didn't write it down. Mm-hmm. And because it's daily, and he says, I'm going to tell you, write it down, and then you'll see it happen, and the just will live by faith. And I'm going to ask you, and then have you ask others to take what I say, and my question back to you is going to be, do you believe it? Mm-hmm. Well, it's going to be a question before it happens. See, our prayer life tends to be backwards. God, right. Would you? When I see it, okay, good. And if it doesn't happen, I guess no. And God says, well, how about if I say it, and I'm going to ask you, do you believe what I just said, and walk into what I just said?
Right.
That's faith. And he said, that's what he's trying to say. Write down the vision, tell others the vision, and ask them, are they going to believe it? And you'll get to see it. And when you see it, what does that do for faith?
Oh, that builds it immensely.
Like, wow. He said it happened. He said it happened. And that's what,
right. And then he's magnified in that.
And he's glorified in the process. And we say, God said, and it actually happened. And how cool is that? And so our prayer life is, it's okay. I know you don't get it. I might even ask you to be part of something that's really difficult. You can talk to me. Let me tell you. And I do want your response to be, I have a heart to hear.
Mm-hmm.
He said it'll go well with you if you have a heart to hear. If you reject it and walk away, then you're not going to get the beauty of what I have for you, and I can't give it to you. But Habakkuk says, I'm willing to be corrected.
Right.
All right. I'm gonna listen. What do you got to say? Well, I got a vision. Write it down. Okay. And journal, so that what is God saying? What are you seeing? What are you understanding? And then that's what you dialogue with another party, with your spouse, with your inner circle. You're getting more insight, and you're processing further the beauty of what God is telling you step by step by step. So just remember that prayer is such a beautiful thing. It doesn't carry by itself condemnation at all, even when we're not right, or even when we're walking away. See, God says, what I care about, and this is what we want everybody to receive this. God says, what I care about is you. Mm-hmm. Just be with me. And I know you got emotion. I know you don't get it. I know things are confusing. I know it doesn't make sense to you. I know even what I'm asking you to do, you'd rather not. Mm-hmm. I get it. What I care about is just stay with me with a heart to be corrected. And we'll get there to the beautiful peace of the covenant life. You're going to be a blessing. You're going to be blessed to be a blessing, even in this. And by the way, he was one of the remnant. Mm-hmm. So Jeremiah, Habakkuk, Daniel, they all got to be part of the remnant because he got shown what God is up to, and then you get to live that out. And so it's really a beautiful thing.
That is so beautiful. I love that. That's been one of my favorite passages forever. So I love just hearing you teach on it one more time.
Yeah, it's really fun.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, everyone. And if this brought questions to mind, please send them in at questions@afjministry.com. We are more than happy to talk about them on air or even dialogue with you offline. If there's something personal, feel free to do that. So thanks for joining us. Looking forward to tomorrow.
Yep. We'll see you then.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Come and See, your podcast for truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. Send us your questions and comments, and tune in tomorrow for more answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. Remember, God's will is best and none better. His truth brings peace in this world of chaos.